I think the threat of being shot dead may have changed me a bit, but I think the understanding of, well, it's the understanding of the metaphysical, really, that changed me.
I'm Thomas, and this is Mirror in My Cell, a conversation series on the strength, truth, and humanity known through incarceration. My normalish life was interrupted when some stowaway cannabis of mine reappeared at a Belarusian border checkpoint. The sentence would be 3 to 7 years. I was forced to witness myself and understand the power I do have. It changed me and how I saw my life, and now I want to know how others have been changed by it. Professor Paul Dieppe is an eminent medical scientist, originally specialising in rheumatology, and that's who he was when he was invited to a conference in Malaysia in 1991. That's who he was when the plane was unexpectedly grounded, and that's who he was when he was taken hostage in Iraq. Saddam Hussein had just invaded Kuwait. Paul has recounted how the plane was destroyed and him lined up to be shot on the tarmac before a last-second intervention, how he's used as a human shield to protect Saddam Hussein's munitions factories for months on end. He stared into a black and chaotic truth that is hard to deny as inherent to humanity. But Paul's journey opened his vision onto the nature of the beyond and the metaphysical forces that play a role in our lives, an unusual place for a scientist to start testing hypotheses. Paul speaks rarely about his experiences, and even 30 years later is still trying to process and understand exactly what they meant for him. It was an honour to speak to him. Paul's written a book detailing his journey from being a doctor with utmost faith in modern science into a person who suspects there might be more at play in the universe, especially when it comes to being healed. It's really one of the best books I've ever read, and it's called Healing and Medicine, A Doctor's Journey Towards Their Integration. It addresses the growing skepticism I had about a modernity that is congealing around data, units, and optimization. And maybe there's more involved in truth than what we can measure. Maybe there's a cost to reducing reality to only the tangible. Hope you can find something wise in either his book or in this conversation for yourself. Now, Paul invited me to his house to record the conversation, and I belied my competent outer shell by botching some of the audio, which I've tried my hardest to resurrect in post, but I'm very sorry about that. I hope you'll be able to enjoy the conversation nevertheless. Hello, Paul. I'm sat in your living room. Thanks for having me.
A pleasure.
So I think you were, when my mum brought you up for the first time, that was one of the first people that I felt like I really needed to speak to and understand what their experience of being incarcerated and held against their will was like. And it's quite a famous story, isn't it? What you were part of.
Yes, it's had quite a lot of coverage in the media, and there's going to be quite a lot more coverage in the media fairly soon, which is a mixed blessing for me.
Mm-hmm. And I think if I had to say the reason why I was so drawn to that story, I guess it's not necessarily for the same reason that probably that where lots of that media attention has come from, but it's really been how the distance and the responsibility and the like humility with which it seems like through time you've been able to comprehend what happened to you.
Yeah, as I was saying a few minutes ago, it took me a long time to process it, to recover from post-traumatic stress, to sort myself out. But it changed me irrevocably. But another thing that I think is important to say, that certainly I don't talk about at all in the book I wrote, is that it changed my whole family irrevocably. So the effect on people around you and the effect on other people, loved ones at home, of incidents like this is huge. And I think it gets forgotten about and underestimated, and people concentrate on the so-called victim rather than necessarily thinking about the impact on the family. So my biggest problem that I still have is guilt about the damage done to my family. I mean, guilt's absurd when it's not your fault, but guilt doesn't work like that.
Mm. I think before we switched on the mics, we were kind of reflecting on what made our experiences different in some way. But I think that's definitely part of it as well, and the fact that I'm kind of in my 20s, childless, no one's dependent on me. It meant that the whole experience was very much about me in some ways. But reading your book, as I understand it, you felt clearly that there were lots of other people that it was about at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not at the time. I didn't. Well, I guess I thought about the family quite a lot when I was out there, but I was completely blind to what they might be going through. I was worried about what I was going through. Because, every day could have been my last out there. Loads of young teenagers from Iraq wandering around with Kalashnikovs they didn't know how to use and having fun letting them off every now and then. And lots of nonsense of that sort. So I was worried about me. I wasn't very conscious of what was going on back here, but I had 2 teenage daughters. It's not a good time for them to lose their father. Is he ever coming back? We don't know. And my wife went through a lot, and my father died while I was out there. And all of that's left me in big trouble for a long time. Once I'd comprehended the impact the incident had on them, that was an added trauma after getting back, I think.
Mm. Do you think you can detect that in your family still today?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, my daughters have come through fine, and there was one quite good outcome for them in that they sort of, they were teenagers. One was 13, one was 16 at the time, and they kind of hated each other. When I went out there, and they've loved each other since, which is quite nice. I mean, that may have happened anyway. Who knows? Teenagers go through phases, don't they? So that's all right. They're fine. My wife still struggles, and she had a very difficult time for months afterwards, and she still struggles with it. I still feel inappropriate guilt that I killed my father, and that bothers me. So yeah, I'm still saddled with that. It doesn't go away.
Would you mind just talking through exactly what happened and also where you were in life before it happened?
Sure. I think I was, well, beforehand I was in a position where I was rather pleased with myself, because I was doing well in a conventional role as an academic doctor. It was all going fine. I was being given lots of plaudits for my work. I was being invited around the world. I had a good team working with me. I had a lovely family. I was conventionally pleased with myself in a sort of arrogant, self-satisfied way without thinking about what was really going on in me or in the world, I think. I guess I think now that that's how most of us operate most of the time. We're brought up to exist in the conventional environment and society that we're brought up in, and if we succeed in that, and we think we're doing fine, and we get very pleased with ourselves, and we get very arrogant, and we get set in our belief systems, I think, that we must be right because it's all going well. So I think I was there, and I think I was probably quite arrogant and quite self-satisfied. And then what happened? Well, I was invited to a meeting in Malaysia by an old friend who'd been a student of mine, who actually became I was a rheumatologist, and I taught her here in Bristol. And she went back to Malaysia and was the first rheumatologist ever in Malaysia, and set up rheumatology and a rheumatology society in Malaysia, and is still a good friend and a wonderful woman. And she'd invited me before out there to do teaching a few times previously, and she invited me to come out again for a big meeting and to do some teaching in Kuala Lumpur. So I said, yeah, okay. Then I think she sent me, or they sent me, the organisers of the meeting, a ticket for a Malaysian Airways flight on possibly July the 31st of 1990. And August the 1st was changeover day for junior doctors, and I had junior staff that I thought I was responsible for in the hospital. And it's changeover day. I wanted to meet the new lot that were coming in on August the 1st and sort of imbue them with my philosophy and my arrogance, probably. So I got my secretary to change the flight to a British Airways one that was going out on the evening of August the 1st. I would still be in plenty of time for the meeting. So I changed the flight. That was a mistake. So the flight was delayed so that some SAS boys could get on the back. We didn't know that at the time, but it was delayed, and shortly after main boarding, a dozen or so strapping young men got on and went to the back. They were the SAS, we now know. And then we set off, and then we landed in Kuwait, and then all hell let loose, really. We told, get off the plane, don't take anything with you, rush, rush, rush. And then there was bombing all around the airport. And so that was quite distressing, really. I was just thinking, I'll get another flight or something because I'm supposed to be in Kuala Lumpur. Anyway, taken to an airport hotel, then taken to a hotel in Kuwait. Reasonable conditions there for about 3 weeks. Then broken up into small groups.
Does anyone explain to you what's happening at this point? Or
no, nobody explains what's happening.
You're just not getting on your next flight.
Well, no, that's not quite true. I guess we knew that Iraq had invaded Kuwait, and there were lots of Iraqi soldiers about, and there was lots of bombing and shooting going on around the hotel. So we knew conditions weren't good outside, and that this was a war zone. We knew that, but we had no idea about what was going on, whether there was any attempts to get us out or anything. No idea at all.
Did you know what you had to do with it, or why they thought you had something to do?
Well, it was everybody on the plane, so it wasn't me.
Okay.
It was a whole plane load.
Yeah.
So there was no singling out of individuals. And then after about 3 weeks, they broke us up in the middle of the night. They liked to move us around in the middle of the night. Quite clever, these Iraqis, actually. Been trained at Sandhurst, as I discovered those.
Wow.
So they knew what they were doing. So middle of one night, they woke everybody up in the hotel, got us all down to the lobby, split us into random small groups, took us to different destinations. I was taken to a small bungalow in Kuwait docks, where I spent, I think it was 99 days, I think, with initially 12 other people. Then the women were let out very soon after we went there. So then it was 8 other people, I think. And then one of the men was let out. So then there was 7 of us. It was a 2-bedroom little bungalow. Would have been quite pleasant, probably, but Iraqi soldiers have been in the 3 weeks since the invasion and smeared it with excrement and made a complete nightmare of it. But we sort of got that sorted out fairly quickly. And was it too bad? Well, it was very little food, so we were in trouble. We lost a lot of weight over that couple of months, 2 to 3 months period, and we weren't allowed out for about the first 6 weeks. So no exercise, not much food, and lots of scary youngsters who didn't know where they were in the world with Kalashnikovs banging around and bursting into the bungalow, and so they were quite scary, and a lot of uncertainty, I think, was the biggest issue for us probably then.
Mm-hmm.
Very briefly after that, we were taken up in coaches from various places around Kuwait up to Baghdad. Put in a hotel for a couple of nights where the late Tony Benn came to try and get us out and spoke a lot of bollocks. Just didn't get us out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he was a well-meaning man, but he didn't know what was going on. He'd been badly briefed as far as our conditions were. The Americans got given lots of goodies by their embassy. We got fuck all, the Brits. It was just, by then it was British, American and Japanese men only, because the other nationalities had all been let out. And then after a couple of days in Baghdad, you're going home, Mister, come and get in a bus, you're going home, and taken to a poison gas factory in northern Iraq. Splendid.
Sounds like Butlins.
Yeah, well, quite. Yeah. I thought I was definitely going to die there because by then we knew that the West were planning to take out Saddam Hussein, and kind of target one would be a poison gas factory, wouldn't it? So that wasn't very pleasant. But then after about 3 weeks there, we suddenly heard we were going to let out, and a bus came and took us back to the hotel in Baghdad, and then a couple of days later we were flown out by Iraqi Airways. So it's all pretty strange, isn't it, really, thinking about it?
Mm-hmm. I kind of get the impression that your impulse is to, and I had this very much so as well, to like tell a story that wasn't really your own in some ways. Like that, there's lots of geopolitical details, but for me, I explain the story of how my mum got me out and all of the diplomats and behind the scenes Kremlin conversations that happened and so on, and it's this Cold War thriller basically of how I got out. But then I sort of also, and that's what people want to hear when they hear like Belarusian jail story, that's kind of, they want those spicy ingredients. But then I'm like, actually, that wasn't really my story at all. I'm not sure if that's a fair thing to say to you.
No, I relate to that completely, and you're absolutely right. So yeah, so my natural tendency now is to, as you say, put it in the context of a geopolitical story, if you like. I did that less in my last diatribe than I often do, where I often loose off about Saddam Hussein and things like that. So I tend to do that, and I tend to talk it down and not talk about feelings and bad bits. And partly that's protecting myself, because there were some very bad things that happened, and I don't talk about that, and I don't write about that either. So I've never written about seeing Iraqi soldiers hung from trees by their mates. I don't talk about that. I don't think about that, actually. But it's still there. It just surfaced. And, being taken out into the garden of the bungalow and lined up to be shot. And then, you thought we were going to shoot you. These are not nice experiences, but I don't talk about them. I just did.
I think we had very, very different experiences. And I can totally see that. I don't know how someone would try and process or make sense of those kind of things.
No, I don't think you can really. I mean, I spent some time, I think, in a position of deep concern for the human race, because I thought, you see, I mean, okay, I'm going somewhere else now. I don't know whether this has any interest or used to, but I've started, so I'll finish, as they say. So some of the Iraqi lads who we met, who were put in charge of us, were educated and spoke English. And so we got to know, or I rather got to know, a couple of them reasonably well. I got to know particularly the guy who was in charge of the camp in Fallujah. He was a teacher from a village in Iraq, and he was a nice man, I thought. And he wasn't bad to us at all. He was just following orders. And he said at one point, he said, so I've been told you can write a letter home, all of you. So if you'd like to write a letter home, and I'll see if I can get them out for you. So I wrote a letter explaining where I was and what was going on. And he brought it back to me. He said, I can't send that, Paul. I'm sorry I can't send that letter because you've given enough information for people to know where we are. And that won't get through the censors. And I said, well, why don't you give it a try, see if it will get through the censors? He said, no. Now, he said, what they do is if they find out that I let it through, they'll probably go to my village and murder my wife and children. So I'm sorry, I'm not going to let it out. And I thought, fuck, what sort of a life are these people in Iraq living if that's the situation? And so I tore my letter up in front of him and apologized to him. But that sort of thing made me really despair of the human race, actually. If that's how we can behave to each other in a prosperous nation like Iraq. I just thought, there's no hope for humanity. And I went through a phase of being really sort of depressed about that.
But it also sounds, you spoke about that guy and some of the younger guys with a degree of empathy as well. And you sort of, in your book as well, you said, would I be doing anything that different, or could I even be upset at them?
That's what I thought. I thought, well, if I'd been in his position, I wouldn't have let that letter out either. So yeah, but it's more the people down the line who would be no qualms about going around to the village and shooting his family. I believed him. I don't know whether it's true.
And because this is also one of the way you talk about healing, or kind of like how you understand healing, is that need to connect with someone else, or the love or energy needs to flow from one being to another.
Yeah.
Was any of that happening between you and the people that you were getting to know through that time?
Yes, it was. I think I talk about one of those in my book. American bloke I spent some time with in Fallujah. I'll tell you one other, though, which again, I don't talk about or write about. I don't know why. Well, I do know why. I wanted to go away. I wanted it all to go away. So when we were in Fallujah, we were allowed a weekly telephone call out. Great luxury. And I don't think this is in my book, is it? I doubt it.
I don't think so.
So it was a very surreal experience. So we were driven in a truck through desert full of packs of wolves, all quite exciting, and to the outskirts of Fallujah, to a little post office, I suppose, where an elderly Iraqi man would pluck some wires from the ceiling, twist them together a bit, ask us for a number, and then fiddle about a bit and look puzzled, and then take the wires down and twist different ones together. And finally get a line out somewhere, and we were allowed about 2 minutes each on the telephone or something. all the time with the Kalashnikov boys hanging around. So doing that one day, and I have my phone call, and I go out to the area just outside the shop where we were held, and one of the other lads comes out in tears, and I take him by the arm and say, "What happened?" And he said, "Well, I've just heard my father's died." It's very poignant in view of what I heard later, that my father died, but I didn't know that at the time. And I just held him while he cried. I'm getting quite emotional talking about this. And it was a very intimate moment. And I don't know how long it lasted. We were herded back into a truck and driven back to camp. But that was an extraordinary moment. And I didn't know this man very well. He was English. He was one of the flight crew, actually, from another aeroplane. But, and I didn't know him much. I hadn't seen much of him before then. And he took me aside the following day and just said, "Thank you." And in a meaningful way. So that's one that was for me was very important, and certainly was for him too. There were others, but that's the one that has come to the front of my mind as we're talking. And so, yes, there were those events, and I think it's those events that changed me as much as anything else, really. I think the threat of being shot dead may have changed me a bit, but I think the understanding of, well, it's the understanding of the metaphysical, really, that changed me. The understanding, I mean, that's not explicable through pure materialistic thinking and science, which I've been brought up on. I've been brought up on science to believe that, there was never any mention of anything like a soul or a spirit. We're just lumps of meat. As far as medical science is concerned, we're just lumps of meat. I don't know how much philosophy you know or care about, but lots of philosophers like Daniel Dennett and lots of scientists like Francis Crick believe, well, Crick's dead, but Dennett isn't, but believe very strongly that we are just lumps of meat, free will's an illusion, and we're just automata. And that's really how the medical profession believes in that. And so if something goes wrong with a bit of meat, you use a chemical or a knife or something to try and put it right. So, and I'd gone along with that, and I was good at that, really. I knew which chemicals to use and that sort of thing, and how to figure out which bit of the lump of meat had gone wrong. But I think it was instances like that in Iraq that changed my thinking forever. I no longer think we're just bits of meat.
Mm. And was that some type of like counterbalance to the darkness and pessimism you felt about humanity to kind of like see through? Yeah. Mm.
I was, and to some extent still am, struggling with that dichotomy. One of my colleagues who I still work with, she was a philosopher, read an early draft of my book for me, because I must don't take what she thought. He said, anyway, she said, "Yeah, you're suffering from cognitive dissonance. You can't reconcile your new self to your old self. Your old self was sounds, your new self is spiritual, and you're not able to reconcile the two." And I think she's right, really. I don't think I've quite got to grips with reconciling those two sides of her own.
I can imagine that being quite tricky to process. Is there, especially hearing you talk about your story in relation to these bigger geopolitical things that happen, was there an impulse to just kind of not reconcile anything, or not try and understand anything, or comprehend things at some point? I think for me that was that was something that I had never done, but being in that situation, which was so confusing and kind of truly revealed how unknowable so much of what happens is, that don't be upset if it doesn't make sense to you. Was that something that happened for you as well?
No, I think I'd learned that lesson long before in my life. Should I tell you about that?
It sounds significant, yeah.
So when I was a medical student, I did a period of work in a hospital in Palestine in '66, when there was one of their wars out there. They were always having them. And it was fine, but they'd just been through, Palestinians had just been bombed and had the shit taken out of them as usual by the Israelis. And you can see where my sympathies lie. So chatting each other ahead of the hospital about all that, I said I was, sorry that this area was bombed by the Israelis. He looked at me and said, "Israelis? No, well, no. We watched the airplanes coming over. They all had American markings on them." And I just thought, oh. So my press in England has told lies about this, or else it doesn't know the truth, or else this man's lying, and I don't think he is. So that, for me, was the first time that I realized that truth, particularly in a geopolitical sense, probably doesn't exist, and that we don't really know what's going on in this world or what's happening. So actually, in Iraq, I mean, some of the lads used to try desperately hard to cling to any fragment of news that we might get. Towards the latter period of the time out there was a lad who had a shortwave radio that we got some information on. And I just wouldn't listen to it because I knew I wasn't going to leave it anyway. So, yeah, I've learned that before.
But I guess, I mean, truth in the more like personal sense, in some way, like understanding the truth of who you are and why you are.
Yeah, well, yes.
But oh golly. sorry. It really took a turn there. But it seems, I mean, it sounds like you struggle to reconcile some things about you, but I also struggle to reconcile some things about you. But yeah, I guess hearing you talk about kind of giving a hug to that man and saying, "I'm sorry," sounds like probably one of the most powerful moments of your life in some way. But there's not a textbook or a material explanation for why that should have felt how it did, or been any type of counterbalance to your spirit, as opposed to some of the other things that you experienced.
And there were one or two other experiences like that. I think that's probably the most powerful one. But hey, yeah. But I don't think that has really helped me understand who I am, or why I'm here, or the big questions.
And I think that's the heart of the thing that I'm finding hardest to reconcile about you in this conversation, is especially also in light of having read some of your book as well, because a big part of it seems to be, and it seemed like this, I also get the impression this happened whilst you were in Iraq, but the kind of the letting go of your own ego, and the kind of like understanding that it's not about you in lots of ways. But at the same time, the way you speak about it, I hear a lot of like guilt, and like implicitly it somehow feels like it is on you somehow to make sense of it, or carry some of what you've experienced.
Got rid of the arrogance and ambition completely by any means. Why would I write a book if I had? So There's still a bit of me that wants to change the world, and still a bit of me that thinks I can. And I don't like that bit very much.
But I also don't think minimizing your ego and being aware of your capacity are incompatible sentiments.
No, other people say that to me, like my philosopher friend.
Hmm.
So, but I still struggle with these, if you like, the big questions. Who are we? Why are we here? What's going on? I don't know. I currently cling to what's called panpsychism, or well, it's called various other things, but sort of the basic belief is that consciousness is the primary universal essence, and everything else is secondary consciousness. And consciousness is in everything, and that gives me intellectual peace, and helps me intellectually. Not sure it helps me emotionally,
It doesn't sound like it.
but that's an intellectual protection.
Yeah. It sounds like you found an equation that balances almost.
Yeah, sort of, yeah. But say it doesn't help me emotionally very much. With, reacting in strange, unpredictable ways to situations and things like that. We are very complex individuals, aren't we?
Mm-hmm. And at the same time, quite simple. It's quite confusing like that. Well, you have. I'm gonna do my best. Like I'm plugging your book bit now, but Paul has written this incredible book called, here it is on the coffee table, Healing in Medicine: A Doctor's Journey Towards the Integration, which I was complaining to him before we started recording that it looks and sounds a bit too much like something that was designed to be shared at conferences, but is one of the most powerful books I've ever read, I think, and does examine, I wouldn't call it a question because it doesn't feel that simple, but there's something inside of me that doesn't feel met by everything that I've been told or experienced so far. And it addresses that in a very humble and inquisitive way, which I find really, really powerful. And I think it does feel like there's something that we are all collectively struggling with at the moment. And I think you're in such an interesting position, having been a kind of an academic medic by background, where there's so much emphasis on, you call it kind of like scientism and materialism, but I don't think that's restricted to that profession in lots of ways, and especially living under a society that's constantly trying to optimize and kind of find the most efficient way of doing things, often along very kind of narrow metrics. I think lots of people will resonate with the idea that there's something bigger than just the variables that we've been told to treat as important, that are very fundamental to being whole people and a whole planet in some ways. So it's a really, really powerful book.
Now do this. No, you should know that this man is an agent.
No, it's not. I mean, I would definitely tell someone to like make the cover look a bit more like, I don't know, like in W.H. Smith. I'm not picking that up, I'm afraid, but like I'm sure there's a way to make it happen. I'll see. Yeah, I'll see what we can do. Yeah. It's a really powerful book, and I also think I was reflecting on this as well, is the fact you're a doctor as well. I mean, they're famously one of the types of people that has society's most innate trust. But I really love about the book is that it never moves. I mean, if you're dealing with these kind of like heavy philosophical topics, you're typically reading something pretty like esoteric, or it's easy to feel like you're climbing up some woo-woo tree with someone. But this is very grounded in just like, at the end of the day, does a person feel better, like yes or no? And it never deviates too far from that. So it's such a grounded and kind of like pragmatic way of examining these like super huge topics. And I mean, even you as a person and how you've approached the topic itself is really, really beautiful. And like I said before, humble. But I think that's quite unique to be dealing. I mean, to come to be a scientist and be humble, and to equally be someone spiritual and be humble. That's quite unique for both those professions in some way. And to be both of those things at the same time and have like humility as the foremost thing, I think is a really, really incredible feat to pull off. So, so thank you primarily, and congratulations second. Yeah, I guess. And I think that's, we said again before we turned on the microphones, or when we were reflecting on what was similar about our experiences and different about them. I think, I mean, having read your book before and understood the story a little bit before, and even more so for having sat down with you here, I recognize that there's very little of what we needed to process that was the same, essentially. But I think where there is an overlap is the kind of the space and time we've taken to heal and ask questions afterwards, I think is where that comes from. Was there anything about the experience which was an opportunity for healing for you, or was that all stuff that happened in the aftermath that you needed to heal from it, or was it something healing? Was there anything about it that was healing?
Well, I think not much.
Mm.
Although I guess experiences like that with the flight crew lad who had lost his father, I guess that was a healing experience. And so there were odd experiences like that, but really all of that happened afterwards, I think. But I'd take issue slightly with what you have said, that, okay, our experiences were very different, but there's a commonality of total disruption. And total disruption of life can happen to lots of people, various reasons, various ways. Happened to you in a bizarre way, happened to me in a bizarre way. But they're both total disruptions from where you have to sort of think your way through them and start again. So you found my book helpful, which is great. When I got back, the book I found most helpful was from named Brian Keegan, who was held for 5 years in a jail somewhere, along with people like Terry Waite. I don't know whether you remember that story.
No.
So there was a period, I think it was in Lebanon, that some people were held hostage in appalling circumstances for an incredibly long time. And Brian Keenan, he was one of them, an Irishman. And he wrote this book, which is called An Evil Cradling. Now, his experience was so much worse and more awful than mine. He was, in solitary confinement for a long period of time. He was chained to radiators and stuff like that. And he got out and he sort of got back to functioning in the West and wrote this book. And it had a deep impression on me. So his experience was deeply worse than mine, but here's a man who was trying to deal with that and trying to find a way through it all. So I found that very helpful, even though his experience was degrees of many degrees worse than mine. So mine was probably degrees worse than yours, but they're all disruptive experiences that change you and change your approach to life. And so comparisons, I think, are not useful. I think understanding that your life's been thrown upside down and that you have to find a way through that, and it faces you with the questions you've been asking. Who are you? What are you here for? You have to face all those questions for a first time in our lives, because I, like you, come from a privileged background and have had it easy. So I don't think the comparisons of experiences are very helpful. I think the understanding that you need to reconcile yourself to the disruption and deal with being faced with the big questions. I think that's what's about.
Mm.
So you're facing up to the big questions now for the first time.
Mm. And I feel like that's something that I'm very grateful for in some ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I understand that, although the gratitude took quite a while.
I can see how that might happen. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I kind of often refer to it as like punctuation in some way, to have like such a clear moment where there was like a before and an after.
Before, absolutely.
Mm.
I think you're bang on there. And I think that's exactly right and the right way to deal with it.
Mm.
And yeah, before and after is a nice way of looking at it, I think.
Mm.
My life's definitely before and after.
Mm-hmm.
Your life will be too, I think.
Mm. And I feel I'm I mean, it makes even less sense to sit here with you, but like I'm so grateful. As I've said, I'm very grateful for that experience, and feel like everyone could do with that type of punctuation or an understanding that
Yeah,
that there's a moment. This is now the moment to ask myself these questions and be generous with myself, be tender with myself, but time to take on board what or time to take action on what I think some of the answers are.
yeah, very good. I think you're better at this than I am. I think the things that I'm not very good at is something you just said, which I think is hugely important, which is be kind to yourself.
Mm.
I'm not very good at that.
No, you don't sound it, I'm afraid. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm not very good at that.
Mm.
So I mean, to work on that, I guess.
Mm. I think I spoke to someone last week who talked about someone being told by his caseworker in prison. I think he was in prison somewhere in London, and not someone from a background where he would have the means to use language that we use to talk about our experiences, etc. And he was saying that this social worker just told her prisoner, one of the inmates, at the end of a session, like, "I love you," not in a romantic way, but just. And he was saying that was basically something transformative for him to hear. And I reflect as I've been doing lots over the last few months, like why was I able to go in there? And kind of have this carpe diem attitude whilst being in prison in Belarus, or how could I take it to be a great experience and something that allows me to grow to be the person I want to be. And I think that made it clear, and that kind of like that the love that it was inherent to how I exist and how I've always understood the world to be because of how I've been raised, especially my family, but even wider in the country and schools and friendship groups I've had. That's something so inherent to how I process the world, to know that there's value in me being me, and I deserve, like, there's a reason why there's something worthy about me being me and trying to be my happiest self. But what do you make of that theory? Or I hope that you've had love in your life as well.
I have, and yeah, yeah. I know. I think you're ahead of me.
Not sure, but I'm willing to hear your argument.
No, I think you're right. I've actually kind of slightly lost the plot of where that bit of the conversation was going. That is fine.
I had a theory going that the thing that made someone different, the things that make a person who enters that fucked up place and kind of like crumples on impact with how dark and fucked up and hopeless the world is, versus someone who can say, no, I deserve to get through this, and of course I deserve it because I'm worthy of love, is the thing that separates those two people. But you make me question that theory.
Well, no, I do think that love is the critical thing. And, but, so I see, I've got this, as my philosopher friends have, I've got this cognitive dissonance. I don't know what love is. I know a bit about what it feels like, but forgive me for a trite comment. My love for my children is rather different from the love for my football team.
Yes.
And so, what is it, and what's going on, and what's it about, and how can we nurture it and use it most effectively? So, I'm still caught up in this difficulty of understanding the world and the key things within it, which love is definitely one, if not the most important. So yes, but
So what? Yeah. But isn't it? I almost think of love as kind of like the opposite of materialism or scientism as we talk about it. It's something that's like so illogical, but so beautiful and pure and compassionate that it's.
okay. So yeah, that's fine. I quite like that idea actually. I quite like Linda. I could run with that one. But there's another word that equally bothers me, which is beauty. Now, I find lots of things like those roses, Jan, beautiful in a way that evokes feelings that are not dissimilar to love.
Yeah, I would take that.
And what is that about? What is beauty about? I found.
But that's why you're hunting for logic then, no?
Yeah, well,
Which is the pointless exercise.
yes, you're right. So stop it. Just enjoy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not really good at that. W random.
Yeah. But yeah.
The essence of the world, I think.
I think it's. I mean, now we talk about it. I think it's highly, highly related to love, isn't it?
I think it must be.
Yeah.
I think it must be. But yeah, I think it must be. But yeah, I can't stop it. You see, I can't stop wanting to analyze.
Yeah. Which was, I mean, it's always such a blessing when you meet someone, because I think in lots of ways you were ahead of me, because that was very much how I processed the world, and I think to meet someone who's probably heaps more intelligent and accomplished at doing that, and in a field as complex as rheumatology, is very interesting. But I think I lost a lot of lost friendships, turned people off for sure by coming at the world with that as a primary lens. And I think Belarus, especially in the cold Soviet system, it was so futile to try and apply the lens of logic to explain what was happening, why it was happening. I mean, even learning the Russian language, if you're trained with the kind of Romance languages, there's nice rules that fit. And obviously there's rules in Russian as well. But so often you'll feel like, okay, I get it. Like I'm fumbling for the doorknob and it turns out it's not there. It's down the end of the other corridor. Like you're completely off. And it became freeing. And this is something that some of the other people have said to me. It was liberating in a kind of way to let go of that need to understand something or not be okay with not understanding.
Yeah, I still have trouble with that.
Learned.
Trouble with letting go of wanting to understand. I don't apologize for that. You know, I don't give any apology for that. I think it's a part of the human condition is to want to try to understand it. And you know, that's gone on through all time and in all societies, that people have struggled to try and understand what's going on. And, you know, those people are philosophers largely in the past and increasingly scientists now. And philosophy gets less of a look in, I suspect. But you know, I don't think we should, I don't feel I should apologize for that.
I think that's true, and that was my impulse for a long time as well. But I wonder if there's a relationship between your unease and that willingness to make sense of things. Yeah. And I think if your impulse to break something down and understand it is something that stops you from being at peace, then I think that's worth examining. I would invite you to examine, say,
Are you a psychiatrist in disguise?
I've broken in under the premise of an interview to psychotherapize you. Yeah. No, but I think, I guess you're bucking the premise of the conversations, which is that punctuation or that crazy extraction from all of the logic and stories that you've built your life around and society has given to you can lead to a strange form of peace.
Yeah.
And I'm upset to I mean, yeah. Yeah. But I'm upset. I'm not upset for the podcast. I'm upset on your behalf. And I am sorry. That's how it is. And I think you've.
Thank you. And I am really impressed by your handling of this interview as well as your situation.
That's very kind of you to say. Thank you.
Really.
And yeah, I mean, I guess I'm astonished that you can, even for a man who hasn't quite found the psychological equilibrium that he deems necessary for the situation, I'm so overwhelmed that you can look at your life and the universe in such a responsible and healthy, loving, generous way as well. And I'm excited to read the book once you're at peace, the one that you make when you're at peace. But I'm the consultant on the front cover of that one. Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited. But thanks so much for allowing me to break in and psychotherapize you.
Very.
Yeah, really nice. Several months later, and I'm still blown away by how honest Paul was about what he went through and how he's endeavouring to process and extract the truth of what the journey has meant for him. The origins of the word healing is the sentiment of wholeness, actually, which I find fascinating, and I would encourage you to check out his book in the description. Cool. Okay, see you in 10 days' time, the 4th of February, where I'm going to be going back to some of the Belarusian roots of my story. Thanks for listening to The Mirror in My Cell.